day and welcome to what I believe will be the last episode of Quilting with Don Bargello. In this episode, episode 8, I'm going to put applique on the Eye of Sauron quilt I've been building for the last 3 months or so, maybe 4. And then I'm going to bind it. So I cut one of the scripts that I'm going to do, which is from the Lord of the Rings movie and the book, of course. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. Ooh, I love it. So there are 4 phrases there, and I'm going to be appliquing 4 parts of the script in different parts of the top. I use the scan and cut to prepare this first part, the 1 ring to rule them all part of the script, in the dark speech. And it gives you an idea where I'm going to place it, which is near the top left of the quilt on the point there. And then the other 3 are going to go symmetrically on the other point there, down here, and down there. Okay? The other cool thing I did is I actually used the fabric I'm going to cut and glue with two-sided fusible web. And here's what it looks like. Isn't that cool? So I'm going to do it with a shadow effect like you often get on text. It's going to be the gold script itself shadowed by a bit of black underneath it. So all I do then to do that is simply cut the black and the gold script exactly the same, and then I lay the black down and then offset the gold a little up and to the left to give it that shadow effect. That's the plan. So applique, if you've never done it before, is actually straightforward as it involves fussy cutting. But the process is this. You prepare the fabric you're going to use for the applique by gluing on a 2-sided fusible web, and I'm using something called Pellon Wonder Under 805 because I found it works well, it really sticks well with the fabric, and I just like the way it feels when it's been worked. So you prepare the fabric by cutting your fabric to the size you need before you start cutting it. Then you glue the fusible web on one side, leaving the paper back. So you obviously glue the web to the back side of the fabric because you're then going to flip it and glue the other side to the quilt. So that's the first step, is preparing the fabric. The second step then is cutting it. And how am I going to cut it? With my trusty scan and cut. This one is a scan and cut by Brother, and its model is SDX85. I believe it's the lowest model on the spectrum, but it does everything I needed to do. It's programmable, I can load in patterns, I can load in stuff. So on that note, the pattern itself I'm using is the Lord of the Rings inscription. I found it online and I was able to massage it into a form where I can actually cut it. So I'm using, I went and purchased it separately, a 1 foot by 2 foot, a 1 foot by 2 foot scanning and cutting mat that works with the scan and cut. So then what I did is I massaged my script so that I can cram as much of it into each 1 foot by 2 foot section. And here's an example. Here's the first one I'm going to cut. It actually includes the first 2 parts of the script. Then the next thing you do is align the quilt top where you want to put the pattern, and then you start gluing down the applique. Same process, you just take an iron and you glue it down. After you remove the paper backing, you take the iron and you glue it down. You take the iron, you iron it down, and the glue will stick to the fabric quite well. That's the plan. So, in summary, it's prepare the fabric by adding the fusible web, cut the fabric by putting it on the cutting mat and running it through the scanning cut, peeling off the paper, and then gluing to the quilt. So that's really 3 steps. 3 steps. For the applique, phase 1 is complete. I have, in fact, cut to size 2 12 by 24 inch fabric pieces, 1 gold and 1 black. And then I added, it's still part of phase 1, the Wonder Under on the back. So you can see it here, especially with the black, that you've got now this papered fusible web that is glued to the back of each piece of fabric. So this mat is a cutting mat that's sticky. You can hear my hands sticking to it. It's made this way, the stick is relatively permanent. Once in a while you do have to clean it off, and you can see I didn't clean it off after the last use. I think I'll be okay because it's still pretty sticky. And so then you take the fabric, and I'm going to do it good side down, because that sticks better to the cutting mat, and I'll just stick it. So you can see here we are. It fits within the 12 by 24 inch area, and then you just flatten it out and it will stick. And it's not going to stick permanently, but what it's going to do is make sure that when the blade starts cutting this, that the fabric doesn't shift, because that's what you don't want. If the fabric shifts, it wrecks the pattern. I have now loaded the cutting mat onto the scan and cut. I've got the pattern loaded in, and I've already set it up to cut. The machine says it's going to take 56 minutes to cut my 2 lines of script in black. Let's get her done. And start. What it's doing now is calibrating the blade. Oh, I should add, this is a rotary cutting blade, specifically meant for fabric. It seems to work much better than the little X-Acto blade that it normally comes with. I bought this separately as well. Alright, it's working. It's about halfway done. About half an hour into it. And you can see how the paper is being cut as well as the material, and the paper pulls away, but that's okay. I left that paper on because it just keeps everything just a little stiffer while it's cutting. But the minute we're done, the paper comes off. I should also mention, if I haven't before, that I created these patterns flipped, so that, because the paper side is up, so that right, when you take the paper off, you then flip the pattern back, and it'll be correct. So nearly done. There's a couple minutes left on the screen. And you can see how the pattern has been cut. Alright, it worked. Here's the cutting mat, and I've peeled away the outer layer and kept mostly in place the black with the good side down and the paper side up. As you can see, the paper is starting to peel away, but that's okay because it's got to come off anyway when we put it on the quilt top. So because I've got 2 lines laid out in black here, before I do any more cutting, I'm going to actually place these onto the quilt top. So that's next. First, applique completed. The black, this is the second phrase, is done. You can see it here. The first one's over here, it just falls off the edge of the board, but there it is. So it works. I have cut the first section of gold, the two top lines of script. Things did not go as planned. I'm going to try to show you here, but there was shifting on the cutting mat with the scan and cut. So this is a risk you take with fabric. Some of these tails didn't cut widely enough, so when I matched them up against the black, they were too thin. That one didn't cut. So you get the idea. I mean, it looks good, but it's not good enough. So I'm going to do some adjustments. Primarily, make sure the cutting mat is as tacky as possible. And then I'm going to try to remove the paper backing to get a better cloth to cutting mat binding. 15 hours between the day before yesterday and yesterday of cutting and gluing, I finished the appliques for the Eye of Sauron. But isn't that great? Doesn't that look fabulous? I also learned an awful lot about using the scan and cut in the process. And bottom line is, I learned for something this complicated and this fussy, the rotary cutter that I had high hopes for just does not work. Too many times it would be cutting along and the fabric would lift off of the cutting mat. Even though it's a tacky cutting mat, it just wasn't tacky enough to hold the fabric down, and therefore the minute it lifted, it started miscutting. I had to do several recuts, and I finally said, enough's enough. We're going to go back to the tried and true method, which is what I first tried and I liked, and that is to peel the paper backing off your fusible web and put the glue that's already fused to the fabric, the glue side down on the tacky mat. And because it's the Wonder Under 805 from Pellon, that glue will not stay on the mat when you peel it when you're done. So it holds it in place perfectly. And not only that, because it's held perfectly, you can use the regular blade that comes with the scan and cut, the razor blade. And so not only does it work perfectly that way, but the cutting time is significantly reduced. It took 8 minutes to cut what would have taken me 56 minutes with the rotary cutter. So that's a win for sure. It worked great. Another thing you get from applique is you get all the leftovers. And I have a ton of leftover cut fabric that I don't know what to do with it because it's all got glue on one side. Carolyn is not ready for me to toss it. She says it's good fabric, but I don't know what she's going to use it for. I have no use for it. But there you are. Anyone who does applique probably, yeah, that's a known thing. When you do applique, you're gonna have leftover fabric. So, one last thing. I have, as a result of how much I love this gold fabric, I'm doing a design change. I'm now gonna use my leftover gold, and I have enough to do the binding. Well, I only have enough to do a two-tone binding, so it'll be gold in the front and black in the back. But it's gonna look gorgeous. The gold I cut into 1-inch strips, the black I cut into 2-inch strips. Then I sew them together, and of course I fold them over and iron them so that they're even. That is going to form the binding. Now I'm going to start sewing my strips of fabric that I just cut. I have 11 strips of the gold, which should give me more than enough, and I have 4 strips of the wide back black. I have sewn and I'm ready to attach the binding. It came out very well, isn't it? Rather attractive with the gold on one side and black on the other. So I only had to do a couple of unsews when I was joining the strips together with their 90-degree corners because I just wasn't quite happy the way it lined up. It's now ready to attach to the quilt. There's a bit of a technique to join the tails of the binding, which I'm going to follow, or for which I'm going to follow a great YouTube video, which I'll give you a link for. Eye of Sauron is on the machine. I've got the binding set with the gold side down and about a 6 to 8 inch tail, and I'm starting in the middle of the bottom, so away I go. What I also did is put a pin a 1/4 inch in from the corner so I know when to stop, because that's the process. You stop and then you do the flippy thing, you sew it down and you keep going. I also set the needle on the walking foot to be a good solid 1/4 inch, so there we go. Alright, what I've just done, of course you can't see it, but I stopped 1/4 inch in from the corner, folded the tail up, straight up, finger pressed it, and then folded it over itself straight down, and now it's ready to sew again in the next direction. Alright, I've sewn on the upper part of the binding all the way around except for the gap that I'm now going to join. But before I do that, I did notice as I'm moving the quilt along that a couple pieces of the applique are pulling up on the gold side, on the gold pieces. So I'm just going to go re-steam them, make sure they're glued down before I do anything else. I just finished re-steaming and ironing the appliques. And Whiskers, I didn't put him there, decided he had to christen the Eye of Sauron. Hello, Whiskers. Kitty Cam. Hello. You like this quilt?
Alright, so here's how the magic happens once again. I've got the quilt top flipped over. So here's the back side. And all I do is, like I said before, I fold down the black to make sure that the black completely covers that stitching from the front. Because then when I stitch in the ditch, that's more or less there on the other side. The other thing I'm going to use is this very cool product, glue-based. It's from Carolyn's Stash. She doesn't use it that often, but I find it works perfect. Because what happens is you put a bit down, I'll go back here, you put a bit down on the top, and you iron it, and it sticks. So then I don't have to pin this. I've stuck the whole I will stick the whole binding, and sew it.
Alright, the binding is completely glued and ready for sewing. So here's a close-up of the binding. That look great. Now it hasn't been sewn, but I do have the walking foot on. And I just stitch in the ditch. And it will trap the back side, the black side at the back. And I'm using black thread, of course. So that's going to hide completely in the black border on this side and the black binding on the back side. That's the theory. Just going to go very slowly, and I can line up the binding, as you can see, right on the center, or maybe just a bit to the right of the center of the foot. So it's a nice visual guide there.
2 inches to go. Great. I'm not gonna push it though. And done. Theoretically, unless I have to do any repairs, Eye of Sauron is finished.
But before we do the big reveal, a couple things. I'll step back here. This is the backing. Isn't that gorgeous? It's an ombre. It's a wide back. I bought it this way. It's lovely. It's very cool. Isn't that wonderful? So how much time did I spend on this baby? A lot. Total hours. I'll show you here the breakdown under the various things like designing, making strip sets, assembling the top, which took the most time, 60 hours. Borders, quilting it, the appliques, and then the binding, which I just did. All told 159 hours. Can you imagine if I was paying somebody an hourly wage to make that, how much that quilt would have cost? And the material costs. Again, I added them all up, and it was mostly fabric. So I paid some extra for the batting, for the backing, the thread. It came out, well, and if Carolyn had charged me for using her long arm, or rather for her doing it, it would have been about 350 bucks. So all told, this quilt would have cost the materials and time on the long arm about 940 Canadian dollars, or about 700 American dollars. Drum roll, please. Da da da! I present to you the Eye of Sauron that I made. It's amazing. It's gorgeous. Now check out, I'm going to show you a zoomed in picture here to show you some of the details with the text, the script, the eye-popping colors of the border. Those that know me know I like to have a wee tipple now and then. And so I have to read this can now because I just came across this at the local store a little while ago. I'm going to move a little closer here. It's called Willy Tonka beer out of the Netherlands. And it even says there's a golden ticket, and if you peel off the label, you might win a case of beer. It's a Tonka Maple and Pecan Imperial Stout. I can't think of a better beer to toast this. So it's also 13% alcohol. So, wow. I'm going in. Oh, it looks dark and rich. You can even see the Guinness label. It's so dark. Look at that. Oh. Okay, so hope you enjoyed all 8 episodes of Quilting with Dawn. Bargello, I've done it. And there will be others in the future, but not for a little while. I must say I'm very happy the way this came out. So, here's to Eye of Sauron. Here's to quilting in general. And may you continue to enjoy your quilting experiences, those that are doing it. Cheers. Oh my. This is a meal. This is so good.